In the gleaming headquarters of quantum dynamics in Boston, tech mogul Victoria Reeves sneers as she challenges a quiet janitor's son to repair her company's revolutionary quantum processor. Little does she know that behind his worn clothes and silent demeanor, Ethan Wright once led the design team for the very technology she now flaunts. Forced out of the industry by corporate betrayal and broken by loss, Ethan had vanished from the tech world entirely. Now, with his father's livelihood at stake, he faces his past tormentors with nothing but a screwdriver and the brilliant mind he'd buried years ago. Would you hide in the shadows or rise to reclaim your legacy? Ethan Wright moves through the polished corridors of quantum dynamics like a shadow. At 26, his tall frame carries an understated elegance despite his janitor's uniform. His handsome, feature-strong jawline, straight nose, and piercing blue eyes are often hidden as he keeps his gaze downcast. Moving with deliberate quietness through the building, his skin is fair, and his short, neatly combed brown hair with hints of gray at the temples makes him appear older than his years. His father, the building's head custodian, had secured him this part-time job to supplement his income from the small electronics repair shop he runs in a forgotten corner of Boston. Ethan's hands are those of a craftsman, steady, but precise. With thin scars from years of working with delicate circuitry, his responses to the occasional greeting are brief, almost apologetic. His voice, a soft baritone that rarely rises above a murmur. What the bustling employees of quantum dynamics don't see is the small apartment Ethan returns to each night. Walls lined with complex schematics and a workbench cluttered with disassembled devices that would baffle most engineers. They don't notice how his eyes linger on the quantum processors being transported through the building, or how he sometimes pauses near conference rooms when technical discussions filter through the doors. In these moments, something flickers behind his guarded expression: recognition, understanding, and perhaps a hint of longing when he thinks no one is watching. His fingers sometimes trace invisible patterns in the air, solving complex equations only he can see. In his wallet, Ethan carries a folded, worn photograph himself at 21, standing proudly beside his MIT professor and a team of young researchers, holding a prototype that would later revolutionize quantum computing. On the back, barely legible now, Ethan Wright, lead architect, Project Quantum Leap. The photo is creased from being repeatedly folded and unfolded, as if he's engaged in a silent debate with himself about whether to remember or forget that part of his life. Sometimes, late at night, he takes it out and stares at the face of the young man he once was confident, brilliant, with eyes full of promise and purpose. When the sleek executives stride past him in the hallways, their eyes slide over him, as if he were part of the building's infrastructure, invisible, irrelevant. What they see is just another blue-collar worker, someone without ambition or potential. What they don't see is how perfectly he understands their whispered technical challenges, or how his fingers sometimes twitch with solutions he will never voice. They don't see the way he meticulously arranges the cleaning supplies in his cart according to atomic weight, or how he times his rounds through the building to coincide with the quiet moments when he can overhear discussions about the very technology he pioneered. 5 years earlier, the name Ethan Wright had been whispered with reverence in the hallowed halls of MIT and the bustling tech incubators of Boston. A prodigy who had published his first paper on quantum architecture at 19, he had led a small team developing a revolutionary approach to stable quantum processing. Their breakthrough promised to solve the decoherence problem that had plagued quantum computing for decades. The technology would make quantum computers practical for real-world applications: medicine, climate science, encryption, changing the trajectory of human progress. His brilliance had earned him the nickname the Quantum Architect among his peers, and his future seemed limitless. Venture capital firm Helix Partners had provided initial funding, with charismatic CEO Victoria Reeves personally overseeing the investment. She had appeared genuinely impressed by Ethan's vision, taking him to high-profile events and introducing him as the future of computing. For a young scientist from a working-class background, her validation had been intoxicating. When she suggested moving development to Helix's private research division to protect their intellectual property, Ethan had trusted her completely. Ignoring the warnings from his father, who had cleaned corporate offices long enough to recognize predators in expensive suits, the memories still haunted him the late night when he'd returned unexpectedly to the lab and found Victoria's team copying his algorithms and designs. His confrontation with her had been met with cold calculation. "You're brilliant, Ethan, but naive. Did you really think someone like you, a janitor's son, would be allowed to control technology this valuable?" The security guards had escorted him out while Victoria watched, her smile never faltering. By morning, legal documents had materialized fine print in his contracts that gave Helix ownership of everything. When Ethan attempted to fight back, Victoria's legal team threatened his father's job and housing. Then came the accidents in the lab that destroyed his prototypes. The suddenly withdrawn recommendations from his professors, the whispers that he was unstable, dangerous, not to be trusted. His former teammates distanced themselves one by one, unwilling to risk their careers. His girlfriend, Sarah, also on the research team, had been the last to leave, tearfully explaining that she couldn't throw away everything for a fight they couldn't win. The final blow came when his mother, already battling cancer, had her insurance mysteriously denied for an experimental treatment. The stress of the legal battles and financial strain accelerated her decline. On her deathbed, she had made him promise to look after his father and find peace. "Some battles aren't worth the cost, Ethan," she had whispered. 2 weeks after her funeral, Victoria Reeves announced the formation of Quantum Dynamics, built on Ethan's stolen research. The bright, confident young scientist disappeared. Ethan destroyed his research notes, changed his phone number, and withdrew from the tech community entirely. He moved with his heartbroken father to a small apartment and focused on one day at a time repairing broken electronics, helping his father maintain the very building where his dreams had been stolen, and trying to forget the future that had been taken from him. The annual Quantum Dynamics Innovation Showcase transformed the company's headquarters into a gleaming testament to technological superiority. Corporate clients, investors, and media representatives milled through demonstration areas where employees proudly displayed the company's latest achievements. Victoria Reeves moved through the crowd like royalty, her crimson dress and confident stride drawing all eyes. At 45, she remained striking sharp features, auburn hair cut in a severe bob, and eyes that assessed everything as either an asset or an obstacle. Ethan pushed his custodial cart through the back hallways, avoiding the main event. His father had called in sick, and Ethan had taken his shift to ensure they wouldn't lose the income. He had nearly finished when the emergency alert on his phone sounded a maintenance request from the main demonstration hall. Critical system failure. Priority 1. His stomach knotted as he realized he would have to enter the showcase, to walk among the very people he had spent years avoiding. The central attraction of the showcase was supposed to be the unveiling of Quantum Dynamics' next-generation processor, capable of maintaining quantum coherence for unprecedented periods. But instead of impressing the crowd with its capabilities, the processor had failed spectacularly mid-demonstration. Engineers huddled around it, their frantic whispers growing louder as Victoria approached, her smile fixed. but strain showing at the corners of her eyes. What exactly is the problem? Her voice cut through the murmurs. Sharp as a blade. The lead engineer wiped sweat from his brow. The coherence matrix is destabilizing. The quantum states are collapsing almost immediately. We've triple-checked the environmental control sets, not external interference. Victoria's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Fix it. Now, Miss Reeves. We need to postpone. This could take days to diagnose. Unacceptable. She scanned the room, noticing the maintenance uniform at the periphery. You, janitor, make yourself useful and get us some coffee while the actual professionals work. Ethan kept his eyes down, turning to leave, when one of the younger engineers exclaimed, "The calibration matrix is completely corrupted. The base architecture must have a fundamental flaw." Victoria's composure slipped. That's impossible. This architecture has been validated extensively. Ethan paused, recognizing the technical details they were discussing. It was his design, but they had implemented it incorrectly. The solution was obvious to him. A simple adjustment to the phase alignment protocols. An investor approached Victoria. Is there a problem with the technology? Miss Reeves? My board is particularly interested in this processor's stability claims. Victoria's laugh was brittle. A minor calibration issue. These complex systems occasionally need adjustment. Her eyes landed on Ethan again, and something malicious flickered in her expression. In fact, since our maintenance staff seems so interested in quantum computing, perhaps he'd like to take a look? Her voice carried through the now silent room. What do you say? Janitor, care to show us your expertise on cutting-edge quantum technology? The crowd tittered. A reporter smirked. Maybe he can hit it with his mop. Victoria stepped closer to Ethan. I'll make you a deal. If you can fix our little problem, I'll personally write you a check for $50,000. Her smile was razor-sharp. But if you damage our multi-million-dollar prototype, you'll be paying for it, you and that father of yours, for the rest of your lives. The chief engineer protested. Miss Reeves, this is ridiculous. He could destroy months of work. Oh, I don't think our friend here will even touch it. Victoria replied. He knows his place. Don't you? She lowered her voice so only Ethan could hear. Still hiding in the shadows. Ethan? Still letting others take what should have been yours? The crowd had formed a circle around them. Phones recording. Expressions ranging from amusement to second-hand embarrassment. The board members watched with detached interest, as if observing an unusual social experiment. Junior employees snickered behind their hands. I always wondered what happened to the great Ethan Wright. Victoria continued, her voice now loud enough for nearby listeners. Might's golden boy, reduced to pushing a mop. How appropriate that you clean the floors in the building where your betters accomplished what you couldn't. A flash of recognition crossed the chief engineer's face. Wright? Not the same Wright who published that theoretical paper on stable quantum architectures years ago? Victoria waved dismissively. A preliminary concept that required significant refinement by actual professionals. Clearly, he wasn't up to completing the work himself. She gestured to the janitor's uniform. Evidence speaks for itself. The whispers spread through the crowd. A former professor of Ethan's, now a consultant for quantum dynamics, stepped forward with narrowed eyes. It is you. I heard you had some kind of breakdown. Turned your back on science entirely. Tragic. Really? Victoria added, examining her manicured nails. But that's what happens when people reach beyond their station. They can't handle the pressure of real innovation. She turned to the crowd. So what will it be? Mr. Wright? Show us all what a wasted potential looks like? Or go back to your mop where you belong? Ethan stood frozen as the weight of 100 stares pressed upon him. His fingers trembled slightly at his sides, and sweat beaded on his forehead. The familiar sensation of panic clawed at his chest, the same overwhelming helplessness he'd felt when watching everything crumble years ago. The processor sat on the display table, its quantum core pulsing with unstable energy patterns that only he could recognize as fundamentally flawed. His eyes darted toward the exit, calculating the quickest path to escape the suffocating pressure of expectation and mockery. He took one step back, then another. The crowd's expressions shifted from mockery to confirmation of what they already believed, that he was nothing. A pretender who had rightfully been relegated to the margins. Victoria's smile widened fractionally, victory already dancing in her eyes. A board member shook his head in disappointment, while a young intern openly laughed. Someone whispered loudly enough for him to hear, "Guess the janitor knows more about toilets than technology." The heat of shame burned across his face, and the old wound of betrayal reopened, bleeding fresh pain through his chest. Ethan turned toward the exit, his father's voice echoing in his mind. Sometimes the smartest thing is walking away from a rigged game. He had made it nearly to the door when his phone vibrated in his pocket. A text message from his father. "At hospital. Chest pains again. Don't worry. Just precautionary. Finish your shift. Son." The words blurred as Ethan's vision swam. His father, the man who had stood by him through everything, who had never once questioned his worth, even when the world branded him a failure, was alone in a hospital room while Ethan cowered before the wolves. His hand instinctively went to his wallet. Fingers, finding the worn photograph he still carried. He thought of his mother's final days, how the stress and heartbreak had accelerated her decline. He thought of his father, working well past retirement age, cleaning floors in the building where his son's legacy had been stolen. The crushing weight of accumulated defeats threatened to drive him to his knees. In that moment, giving up seemed not just easier but inevitable, the final acknowledgement of a battle lost long ago. As he stood at the threshold, another memory surfaced, his mother's voice from years earlier. Before illness and despair had claimed her, "Your mind is a gift." Ethan, not using it would be the real failure. She had believed in him without reservation, had sacrificed to put him through school, had defended his dreams when others dismissed them. The memory of her fierce pride when he'd received his MIT acceptance letter cut through the fog of defeat. She wouldn't want him to run. She would want him to stand in his truth, regardless of the outcome. Ethan's hand closed around the photograph, creasing it further. It took a deep breath, oxygen flooding his lungs and clearing his thoughts. The panic receded, replaced by a strange calm, not confidence exactly, but resolution. The path before him suddenly seemed clear, illuminated not by hope of victory, but by the simple dignity of refusing to participate in his own erasure any longer. He walked back toward the processor, eyes now focused, shoulders straightening with each step. The crowd parted in surprise, conversations halting mid-sentence. Without a word, he removed his custodial jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms marked with the fine scars of years spent manipulating delicate circuitry. "I'll need tools," he said quietly, his voice steady for the first time that day. The silence in the demonstration hall was absolute. As Ethan approached the quantum processor, the chief engineer reluctantly handed over a diagnostic tablet and toolkit, his expression a mixture of skepticism and professional curiosity. Victoria stood with arms crossed, her satisfied smirk suggesting she was merely prolonging the entertainment before the inevitable humiliation. "Perhaps we should record this for training purposes," she announced to the crowd. How not to approach quantum engineering? Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. Ethan ignored them all. The moment his fingers touched the processor housing, A subtle change came over him. His movements became fluid, confident, the hesitant janitor vanishing as muscle memory took over. He accessed the system diagnostics with practiced keystrokes, eyes rapidly scanning through scrolling data that baffled even senior engineers present. The coherence failure isn't in the hardware, he murmured, more to himself than the onlookers. It's a fundamental misalignment in the phase calibration protocols. His fingers flew across the interface, navigating to subsystems buried deep within the architecture pathways only the original designer would know existed. The chief engineer leaned closer. That's impossible. Those are tertiary systems. They couldn't cause a cascade failure of this magnitude. Ethan didn't respond directly. Instead, he pulled up the core algorithm, his algorithm. Though now modified and highlighted a critical section, the entanglement mapping is inverted. You're trying to stabilize quantum states by synchronizing their collapse rather than preventing it. It's elegant, but exactly backward. Recognition dawned on the engineer's face. That would mean the entire theoretical approach is based on a misinterpretation of the original design principles. Ethan finished quietly. For 20 minutes, he worked without speaking further. His focus absolute. The crowd's mockery gradually shifted to uneasy silence as they witnessed the transformation. Even those with no technical understanding could see the difference. This was not a janitor fumbling with technology beyond his comprehension. This was a master craftsman reunited with his creation. Victoria's confidence began to waver. She stepped closer, her voice low and threatening. Whatever game you're playing, Wright, it won't change anything. That processor is company property, developed by our engineers. Ethan didn't look up. Your engineers built it backward. The quantum states are collapsing because the feedback loop is self-reinforcing rather than self-correcting. He made one final adjustment, then initiated the restart sequence. The fundamental architecture is sound. It was always sound. The processor hummed to life. The holographic display above it stabilized, showing quantum coherence levels rising steadily past the previous benchmark, then doubling it, then tripling. Numbers that had seemed theoretically impossible just moments before now registered as stable. Verified readings. The chief engineer stared at the display in disbelief. This can't be right. These coherence times would mean that quantum computing just became practical for real-world applications. Ethan finished, which was always the point. A smattering of applause began from the technical observers who understood the significance of what they were witnessing. Several board members exchanged meaningful glances. A reporter who had been live-streaming the amusing spectacle now frantically called her editor. Victoria's face had drained of color. A lucky guess. Anyone could have. Not a guess. Ethan interrupted, his voice gaining strength. I designed the original architecture. Project Quantum Leap. MIT. 5 years ago. He pulled the worn photograph from his wallet and placed it beside the processor. Before you took it and built it wrong, the whispers erupted into open conversation. The consultant who had recognized Ethan earlier was now examining the display readings with widened eyes. These are unprecedented results. This changes everything we thought we knew about practical quantum implementation. Victoria moved to speak, but Ethan continued, his voice remaining calm, but carrying throughout the now silent hall. The processor was failing because it was fighting against its own design. It wasn't meant to work the way you implemented it. He looked directly at Victoria for the first time. Some things can't be stolen and distorted without losing their essence. The architecture requires balancing synchronicity between opposing states, not dominance of one over the other. You tried to force it into a framework that fundamentally misunderstood its nature. He stepped back from the processor, which continued to function at levels that had the technical team frantically taking notes and capturing data. Your check won't be necessary, Miss Reeves. Consider this, my resignation from the maintenance staff. He turned to the stunned crowd. If anyone needs their quantum architecture correctly implemented, my card is on the table. As Ethan walked toward the exit, the silence behind him was profound. The silence of recalculation, of narrative suddenly and dramatically revised. No one tried to stop him. 1 year later, Ethan stands at the entrance to a modest building in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The sign above the door reads, Wright Quantum Solutions. Inside, a team of young engineers works at clustered workstations. Their enthusiasm palpable. Through the glass walls of a conference room, Ethan's father can be seen proudly giving a tour to potential investors. His health improved, his pride visible in every gesture, as he points to the framed photo of his son on the walnut, the MIT graduation picture. But a simple shot of Ethan, in his janitor's uniform, taken the day before everything changed. The past year has seen a transformation few could have predicted. The viral video of a janitor revolutionizing quantum computing had led to investigations into quantum dynamics' intellectual property claims. While legal battles continue, multiple technology firms had approached Ethan with offers to develop his original vision properly. With full credit and ownership, he had chosen to start small, to build something that reflected not just his technical vision, but his values. A company where innovation wasn't separated from integrity. Victoria Reeves had been forced to step down as CEO amid shareholder outcry and pending litigation. The last time Ethan saw her was across a courtroom. Her crimson power suit replaced by muted gray. Her imperious gaze unable to meet his. He had not pursued personal vengeance against her, focusing instead on reclaiming his work and rebuilding his future. The truth had been victory enough. As Ethan prepares to enter his company, a young woman approaches a student from a local high school's science program. Mr. Wright, I read about what happened to you. How they tried to erase you from your own creation. She hesitates. I'm from a family of custodians too. Everyone says people like us don't belong in tech. Ethan studies her face, the same hunger for knowledge. The same doubt planted by a world, quick to judge, worth by background. The value of your mind isn't determined by your job title or background. Remember that when the world tries to tell you otherwise. But how did you keep going, when everyone thought you were nothing? Ethan smiles, remembering the photograph still carried in his wallet now, joined by a new one of his father's standing proudly in the Wright Quantum Solutions lobby. I remembered who I was when no one was watching, and I had people who never forgot, even when I almost did. As she walks away with new determination in her step, Ethan looks back at the building that houses his reclaimed legacy. He doesn't feel the vindictive triumph he once imagined. Instead, there's something quieter, but more profound, the peace of alignment, of a life finally in coherence with its purpose. True dignity isn't measured by revenge, but by resilience. In a world of quick judgments and shallow appearances, how many brilliant minds remain hidden in plain sight, and what might we achieve if we learned to truly see them?